Scrimmage 1 is in the books. As expected, there's some things we need to improve on and some bright spots as well. I'm bringing Eric Nalin, owner of Inside Texas, back on the show to catch us up to speed with how the team is doing now that the pads are back on. Make sure to subscribe to Inside Texas to stay up to date on your favorite team. And they just joined the On3 network, so expect even more in-depth reporting as the season goes on. And then make sure to pick up your new UT hat for the new season from Last Stand Hats. Use promo code TexasHomer, all caps, for 10% off your hat purchase at laststandhats.com. All right, let's dive in and get caught up on how the Longhorns performed in our first fall scrimmage. Without further ado, let's get into it. What's up, Eric? Glad you're back on to tell us how we looked during the scrimmage.
Yeah, of course, man. Scrimmage number one. It's a crucial point in understanding where they're starting from, and fans need to understand that is a starting point. It's not where they're going to be at the end of August.
No doubt, no need to panic yet. And the quarterbacks have been locked into a QB battle all off season, and the fans were excited to finally see if there was some separation between Thompson and Card. So, were we able to get a definitive answer on the quarterbacks during the scrimmage?
Yeah, I mean, we're not going to get anything resembling closure on the quarterback battle. I don't think even until the end of the month, and it might, the way things are shaping up right now, I wouldn't be surprised if it played into September. They're both battling the same issues, and that is the offensive line is having its struggles versus the defensive line, which, zero-sum football, caveats apply, but, the defensive line, I think we can be relatively confident that the defensive line is good. And obviously it's better than the offensive line at this point. So they're battling that. And then they're battling the issue that the cornerbacks are NFL cornerbacks. Maybe they're not first, second round draft picks, but they're going to be drafted. They're going to make a lot of money playing NFL for a long time. So the cornerbacks are better than the wide receivers. So once that's established, we have to understand, and, we have to kind of grade on the curve with quarterbacks. All right. So that's what I can say in their favor. What I'm struggling with is I'm just not hearing either guy's making plays with his arm or his legs. Obviously in this offense, the quarterback is designed to make plays with his arm first and foremost. Both guys actually made a couple scrambles. Card actually had a 16-yard keeper on the design call, which I thought was interesting. As I was hearing about it, I was kind of joking with the guys. I'm like, I know what Tom Herman would do right now if he was struggling. He would run the quarterback, Obviously, Sam Ellinger had a big win today. The offense is designed to kind of take the pressure off the quarterback with the legs, right? They're trying to do that with Bijan Robinson. Neither guy's making plays with his arms. They're not getting any help from the wide receivers. They are getting some help from scheme. We've heard about some good scheme calls. Xavier Worthy had a nice reception on a scheme call. Kai Money had a scheme call reception when they simulated being backed up to their own 1 yard line. But for the most part, these guys are both looking more like game managers more so than game breakers.
Well, that's wonderful to hear. All right, so we are seeing some game management. Then we should be seeing QBs that are making smart decisions with the ball. Are we seeing bad reads and interceptions?
Yeah, I don't know the final tally on the interceptions from the game. We've heard different things. I think I feel confident that Casey had 2 picks, but I would caution people from getting hung up on that because Hudson had a couple ill-advised throws that could have been picked as well. Sometimes that's just bad luck. I am a little concerned by Casey, his struggles over the middle. The linebackers aren't getting to him, which means, if the linebackers, if a DB is making an exceptional play like, Jameson a couple years ago at West Virginia, that's one thing. You just chalk it up to athleticism. But Casey has been making some bad reads, and he's getting picked. Luke Brockermeyer, I'm starting to call him Luke Kuechly the way he's playing lately. That's definitely tongue in cheek, but also he's also making some plays. That's a little disconcerting. You have to anticipate that linebacker is going to be there and making that drop in that curl hook zone. And so, that's a concern. What Hudson Card has going for him is arm talent, but if the wide receivers aren't getting open, then you're starting to wonder what's really going on here. Now all this can change if they, versus Louisiana, if the corners aren't blanket coveraging the receivers like they are in practice, then it's a different story. Maybe Casey trusts the receivers more, or maybe Hudson, whoever's starting, is making some plays. But right now, there's really not an outlet for these guys to go to unless they're being schemed to hit somebody pretty much on their first progression.
And so the QB battle rages on. And we heard the QBs were struggling at times to get through their reads due to the offensive line's protection. And Flood has been mixing and matching, trying to find that ideal lineup. So, how did the offensive line perform during the scrimmage?
Yeah, so in the post scrimmage breakdown, I didn't separate offensive line and defensive line because you just really can't. If I'm saying something negative about the offensive line, I'm saying something positive about the defensive line. Of course, we don't know where that line is. Again, always have to caution fans with the zero sum caveat. I remember when I first started in this business, I would hear a lot of practice reports, and it was always the offensive line was unstoppable against the defensive line that couldn't be blocked. And it never made any sense to me. I'm like, there's just no way that this can actually be. But zero sum is a real thing, and so we have to guard against that. That being said, Keandre Coburn, Moro Ojimo, Tavondre Sweat, these guys are getting interior pressure really quickly. And so that tells you a lot about the offensive line, obviously. We also think it says something about Keandre and his power and the defensive lineman as well. There hasn't been as much edge pressure as we're hearing about interior pressure, and that's good. Obviously the defensive ends, the jacks, the outside linebackers aren't quite the players that the interior guys are. So that there's obviously that's in play as well. So you got Kerstetter, solid. Christian Jones has probably been the best offensive lineman in camp per a couple sources that we've talked to. So that's good. As far as the scrimmage goes, there were some clean pockets. The quarterbacks weren't necessarily making plays from those clean pockets, but at least they were there at times. They weren't. It wasn't consistent. The run game, they did okay. They simulated a lot of red zone inside the 20 and then also inside the 5. And they did punch it in a couple times. There were obviously the Bijan Robinson self-created touchdowns where most guys would not have been able to. He reversed field on one of his touchdowns from inside the 5 that we heard nobody else would have scored. Overall, man, this is not a pretty picture from what we're hearing about. But again, it's how many defensive lines in the Big 12 can replicate what's going on in practice? I'm not sure. That's going to be the big question going into the season.
We have a super deep running back room that needs this line to function at a high level. How is the running back room looking after the scrimmage? Because we're going to need them this season.
Yeah, the good and bad of running back is that they're usually only as good as their offensive line. And this year, I'm not saying Texas offensive line is going to be bad. I actually think they're going to be league average or better, probably better over the long haul. I have a lot of faith in Kyle Flood, and I think he's got a lot of parts to work with. The good thing about it is Bijan Robinson is a rare multiplier at the position where, you block it for a good amount of yardage and he's going to get a great amount. Normally those runs go for whatever it's blocked for, and then you might get a value out of a couple of yards. Bijan has the ability to do a lot more. Keelan Robinson, in the scrimmage, he only had, I heard way more about him catching out of the backfield than running. And that's actually a good thing to hear about because you want to see that dynamism coming out of the backfield. If they're lacking spark from wide receiver, they're going to have to get it somewhere else, and Keelan Robinson can provide that. But, as far as the scrimmage goes, they got off to a rough start. I heard they had the first 6 carries went for like 10 yards or something like that, and then Bijan popped the 10-yarder, which seems like a home run at that point. But yeah, they're lacking that big playability from the run game, mainly because of the blocking, not so much the talent. I'm not too worried about it. Another bright spot from the scrimmage was, and it's always tough to know because you don't know if it was first team versus second team versus first, and vice versa. They have these different matchups. But Jonathan Brooks turned a lot of heads, and he was catching the eye of NFL guys, not just the typical fan or anything like that. So Jonathan Brooks is looking like he belongs. Obviously, if you watch his high school film, you can see a guy that has the exceptional initial burst. Lateral agility is very good. He's got great size. He just have to kind of get the fundamentals down. So Jonathan Brooks is looking like a guy that can be more than just a 3-star complimentary piece. I never really understood that rating, but so that was a bright spot.
Brooks is going to be special for us in an already special group of backs. We have some intriguing guys in the tight end room as well. So, really, two questions ever at that position: can they block and can they catch?
Yeah, tight end blocking is probably going to be one of the bigger stories of the season. Especially depending on what personnel package Sarkisian wants to go with. If he's going to run 12 personnel, the only way that's going to work is if those guys are matching hats on hats, and helping the run game excel. I'm not worried about these guys in the least as far as receivers. I've heard a lot of good things about not only them catching and moving well in space, but also Sarkisian scheming these guys open. I think that's a if you've been very frustrated with how OU's always got those guys open, I think that teams are going to start to see that same frustration that you've had when it comes to scheming these guys. So I'm not worried about them as receivers. They're quality receivers, but you're going to get to a point where it's a trade-off of, can they block? And if they can't block, then maybe you should have a different receiver or a different personnel package out there. The amount that we're hearing about 20 personnel with two running backs and no tight ends will tell you that they're definitely experimenting because those tight ends aren't getting the blocking assignments down.
And wide receiver has been under the most speculation lately. It seems like individually we have guys, but they aren't more than the sum of their parts when out on the field together. And it's a little confusing. So what's going on there with the wide receivers?
Yeah, wide receiver, those guys are having trouble getting open. They're not consistent. I think there's also some miscommunication at times, which, from my vantage point, tends to be on the receiver more than the quarterback. And then they have drops. They had drop balls in warmups before the game, before the scrimmage, and that's kind of a thing that has been occurring over the last 2 or 3 years. We also heard about bubble screens not working, and I joked. I said the more things change, the more they stay the same. It's just kind of I don't want to say a unit breakdown, but it kind of seems more like a unit breakdown instead of the individual talent. There are some individual talents out there, and I think that there's going to be guys that are going to be productive. One of our good sources said that they're missing Joshua Moore right now because he does have quality hands. Jordan Whittington's reliable. That's going to be your odds-on favorite for the most receptions this year. If he stays healthy, of course. Xavier Worthy's good. Troy O'Meary. He had a big catch. He actually had a couple of big catches this week in practice, some over the top too. Casey hit him on a deep ball earlier in the week, and I think he hit him on another deep ball on Saturday. That's one of those things where you hear about it a lot of times. Guys coming back from knee injury where they don't trust their movement skills yet. That's where Troy is. I think he's still getting comfortable, moving at full speed. So they need him. He's going to be a guy that would be the safety relief valve in a lot of these situations where they're doubling Whittington, or he's got safety help there, or Worthy's blanketed. He's going to have to win those one-on-ones. So they need some help here. It's a work in progress. Andre Coleman is known reputation for being a coach, and this is where he's going to earn his money. We're going to learn a lot about Andre Coleman in September.
And overall, looking at the offense, what is the vibe amongst the offensive coaches?
As far as the offense goes, I'm not sounding the alarm or anything like that. We're going to find out, if you had faith in these coaches, a month ago or 2 months ago or when they were hired, you should still have faith in them. This is what they're here for, to develop, to deploy, to figure out the parts and put them in the right place to succeed. Do they wish they were further along? Of course. Are they? I'm not going to say I'm not going to say they're worried about quarterback at all. I'm not sensing that. They just know that they have a long way to go. Wide receiver was kind of always a question mark when they got there. Sarkisian loves the running backs, loves the running backs. That's going to be a value add. So if they get the offensive line working, everything else is going to round and form. We just know that wide receiver probably isn't going to be a strength, but they're still installing the offense. I don't think that they have put the defense gotten the defense off kilter like they will in a week or two. Then we'll learn a lot more as these scrimmages go on. The defense is always ahead of the offense. Offense requires a lot of choreography. Defense is brute strength, athleticism, and just kind of getting at the ball. It's a lot easier to play than offense.
On defense, sounds like the defensive line did well in the scrimmage. So who stood out? Because we have a ton of depth there.
Probably the way that Sarkisian and the new staff is going to benefit the most from the Tom Herman era is what was left behind on the defensive line. There's a scarcity involved with the amount of giant bodies that can play football. and Texas has a lot of those guys. Most schools would kill to have one or two of them, and Texas has 4 or 5 of them. Maybe even more, especially with Byron Murphy coming on. I mean, there's Tom Herman left them in a very good shape when it comes to that defensive line. So when you have one or two guys like that, you can make hay. When you have 4 or 5 of them, you can really just keep the waves coming. And so you have a little bit of everything. You've got Keandre Coburn is power and quickness. He's actually laterally his lateral agility is kind of unheard of for somebody at 335 pounds or whatever. There's rumors that he's slimmed down, but he's a big dude. He's not small. Tavondre Sweat, same way. Both those guys had sacks in the scrimmage. Moro Ojimo is kind of coming into his own. Obviously, I'm not even sure if he can vote yet, but he's the most technically sound defensive lineman that they have. And I think, the common fan, not to disparage them, but they will underplay the value of being technically sound on the defensive line. How you use your hands is going to get you in the backfield more often than not. That was something that was lacking. The former, the current guys in the NFL that played under the last coaches will tell you that they don't feel like they got that they needed it, and these guys are getting that. Then you got Byron Murphy emerging, and he's going to probably be out there, in passing downs, nose tackle. One of the things that fans are going to cringe. They're playing a lot of those 4 eye fronts that Todd Orlando had, but they're also having that linebacker out there where Joseph Osai should have been playing the whole time 2 years ago. And that's Ray Thornton. Ray Thornton had a sack this weekend, but I believe that was a coverage sack. So it's not always the offensive line's fault. Sometimes the cornerbacks are just doing their job, but it's just a deep unit. Derek Harris had a tackle for loss early in the week. I don't think he had a sack this weekend, but those guys are getting the backfield, and it's one guy's doing his job, which helps the other guy do his job, which helps the other guy do his job, and it really is teamwork.
D-line is going to be a big strength, and the talent we have paired with Bo Davis is going to be something to watch. And we had some movement at linebacker as well. DeMarvion Overshone was held out, so we got to see a couple newer guys playing.
Yeah, the arm bandit, he didn't play. In his place was David Benda, who's Benda could be a starter without a doubt. So you had Benda and Luke Brockmeyer. Of course, Brockmeyer had that pick. Just a beautiful drop. He's got great hands. He could have been an H-back in college without a doubt. And so he's got good hands. He's playing way more confidently than I'm I don't think I ever saw this coming. Like, I knew he had a chance. I did. I go back to what I wrote in 2018. I'm like, this guy, is a scholarship type of player, but he's playing confidently and decisively, and it helps having those guys in front of him, of course. Benda had a sack on a delayed blitz where he came up the gut and got the quarterback. Didn't hear much about the backups. Obviously, this is like one of those situations where you have a swing tackle that you feel confident with. Like Andre Carrick could go play left or right tackle. Benda could play both linebackers. Luke Brockmeyer could play both linebacker positions. So they're at least in good shape with the first 3. I do know Devin Richardson and Jalen Ford had a lot of reps with the second team, but I didn't hear much about them, beyond that.
And we have depth at safety, corner, and nickel this year. We have 2 veteran corners with talented backups. And then PK has been mixing and matching the safeties and nickel, trying to see who fits where. So how did the defensive backs look during the scrimmage?
Yeah, I mean, the defensive backs are a big problem while the quarterbacks are struggling. The wide receivers aren't getting open. These guys are technically sound. They're physically mature. They're mentally mature. In most cases, they could put out a senior laden secondary, which part of being a good secondary is just experience. And then when you put on top of that the talent that they have, even if you just didn't actually look at the tape and you just looked at their star rating coming out of high school, this is a talented secondary. So obviously we know more about them than that. Thompson, he didn't play. He sat out just to protect his hamstring. Or he didn't sit out. They kept him out. Jameson played. Jahdae Barron and Keaton Crawford both split in place of Thompson. Keaton Crawford could have had a pick on Hudson Card. Didn't come up with it. So the corners are going to be good. Obviously telling fans that the corners are going to be good is tough because corners give up plays. Every single one of them pretty much gives up plays. And so players are kind of remember as much for the plays they didn't make for the ones they do. So it's tough being a corner. Texas is going to have good corners this year. It's a bit of a difference over the last years where they had talented corners instead of good corners. Anthony Cook, speaking of talented corners, he was moved to nickel. We broke that last week. He's muscled up. We had that Inside Texas get together in Austin with a bunch of the DBs. I think we had 8 DBs there this past weekend at Haymaker off of Manor Road, real close to the stadium. And, I knew Anthony Cook when he was a sophomore in high school and he was small, and I knew him as a senior and he was small. And when I saw him the other day, I was like, what the hell is going on here? He is muscled up. He still can't carry any bad weight. So he's not big, but he's put together. They've got him playing nickel. He still has the same coverage ability. The thing he lacked for corner was long speed. Had nothing to do with fluidity or technique. He's got fantastic feet. He's got fantastic technique. And he's way more physical than you ever would have thought when he weighed 165 pounds. He had a big scrimmage. He broke up a couple bubble screens where he split the double team, made the play, did that twice. I think he had a pass breakup. He looks really good there. They like what they see. He's actually pushing for playing time at safety when they go to a base defense with only 4 defensive backs. Anthony Cook is looking to come on strong. And something tells me that they're hoping that he comes back and plays another year after this one. They're already talking about how good he's looking. So it's good for him. It's a good reminder that you should never give up on these guys, especially when they're talented. And we'll see if he can keep putting it together. But it's a talented secondary. You got Schooler back there that's looking like a starter. One of the main defensive back, one of the main DBU guys from the 2000s was saying he's probably the best safety on campus. That's high praise, obviously. You got Chris Adamora, who looks like $1 million. You got BJ Foster, who's probably going to start, and never underestimate him. He's one of the most football playing son of a guns on the team. So, they're in a good spot.
And zooming all the way out, you've covered this team for over a decade. So how are we looking compared to other years at this point in fall camp, and where is the ship headed in the coming weeks?
The bottom line, the program right now, it's not easy, right? We're working with incomplete data, and what's right today might not be right tomorrow. Look at the last 3 defensive coordinators, and when they came in, they had experienced defenses with NFL talent, and they kicked ass. Whether or not they won games is different, but the adjusted stats of the defense were very good, and that's going to be the case this year. It's going to be a good defense. Kwiatkowski's coming in on the same cycle that Manny Diaz did, that Vance Bedford did, and that Todd Orlando did. There's experience and there's talent. All right, so that's already going to put the offensive line and the quarterbacks and the wide receivers in a deficit. So let's understand that. What we need to see in the next week or two is that the offensive line is starting to give the defense a lot more troubles, and maybe that happens because they're getting better on gap schemes and playing with angles where you can get these guys moving in the wrong direction. They're not going to blow them off the ball. We know that. So we want to see what's happening in the run game that's going to change the outcome of some of these practices. I have faith in Flood, and some of that's going to come from misdirection. We're already hearing about misdirection. They're using tight ends in misdirection. They're using wide receivers in misdirection, counter game, and all that. So once we start hearing that the offense is starting to get the defense off balance, which I think we're going to start hearing the next week or two. And I'm not going to rig the results if we're wrong. I'll be honest about it. I've broken myself off in my own practice reports a million times by being wrong with my opinion. I expect that the offense is going to start getting these guys off balance a little bit more. And if we start to hear that, then all is going to be right. So I wouldn't worry about it yet. Let's see what happens in the second scrimmage. The real tail of the tape is going to be our final humidor right before the first game, and that's usually where we start saying, "Hey, look, this is what we're worried about. This is what we're confident in." And more often than not, that bears out. A couple of years ago, where the corners had great coverage but couldn't find the ball, and they were always there, and they never made plays on the ball. That was our big concern, and it bore out. So we'll see, man. We'll see. I think we're going to have a good handle on the team. Obviously, our sourcing is great. I think that the offense is going to start getting it straight. The coaching's too strong on that side of the ball for them not to start figuring things out.
Great stuff as always, man. Thank you for coming to give us some insight on the team. I know Inside Texas is working on some cool stuff too.
Well, I appreciate you having me on. Obviously, Inside Texas, we just joined the On3 network, and the On3 network was started by the guys that invented Rivals and 24/7. So, I'm looking forward to keeping that independent spirit that we've had at Inside Texas for decades, but also matching it to that competitive advantage that comes with the network. I feel I'm excited. I'm invigorated by working with these people. I know there's things that I'm good at and we're good at Inside Texas, but we're going to learn a lot from them. We're going to just bring expanded coverage to the fan base. My goal is not to have the best site in the markets. My goal is to have the best site in any market. And to do that, we had to join with On3.
And that's a wrap for Eric. So make sure to go sign up at Inside Texas today. Worth every penny. Watch more of my videos here. And don't forget to like and subscribe. As always, hook 'em.